Hi everyone, we're just going to wait for a few people to join. Give it a couple of minutes.
Try it.
What do they want? Liquor, tickets to Aruba. You're delusional. We're negotiating with them. No, but we're gonna let them think we are.
All right, so I make that 7 o'clock, so let's get going. Welcome everyone to Momentum's Rally for Socialism as part of our Keep Up Momentum fundraiser campaign. I'm Kate Dove. I'll be hosting tonight. I'm one of Momentum's co-chairs that was elected earlier in the year. And it'll be my pleasure to introduce a brilliant set of speakers this evening from across the Labour movement. Now, we're going through some strange times now as crises mount up, from cost of living to the climate. The Tories are collapsing, leaving behind a broken Britain. Workers have had enough. Strikes everywhere, from rail to mail, firefighters to the NHS. And popular support for bold policies like public ownership has rarely ever been higher. In many ways, the case for socialism has never been stronger. But within Labour, the left is under attack. Whether it's the treatment of Jeremy Corbyn, the election's stitch-up scandal, or the waves of prescriptions and the unjust suspensions, there's no denying the leadership's hostility is hurting us. And that's taking its toll on momentum too. As we revealed at the start of this campaign a few weeks ago, our finances have been hit hard by the attacks on the left and by soaring inflation. That's why we're asking our members to up your subs and support to start a regular donation. But that doesn't mean giving up. Far from it. Over the course of tonight's call, which will last around an hour, you'll hear from some brilliant speakers about how we're laying the foundations for a socialist future, from young Labour to local government, building up the socialist leaders and institutions of the future. We'll also talk about what the Labour left needs to do to win again. Thrilled to have Richard Burgon, Young Labour Chair Nabila Moana, Owen Jones, Labour councillors Tammy Hamas and Reginald Popola here with us tonight. Shortly, we'll be sending all of you an email with a unique link to up your subs and simple instructions of how to do it. If you like what you hear, we are asking each of you to open up that email and up your subs now, even by just the price of a pint or a cup of coffee, whatever suits. This will make a massive difference to what Momentum can achieve in the future. You can also up your subs by clicking the link that I believe will be in the chat now. But I know you're all wanting to hear from our first speaker, so without delay, Richard Burgon is the Labour MP for Leeds East and is Secretary of the Socialist Campaign Group. Richard is an inspirational and tireless fighter for socialism who has led campaigns in Parliament for wealth taxes, against NHS privatisation and second jobs for MPs. We're delighted to work closely with Richard on a range of topics. So over to you, Richard, to talk about your work with the SCG and the future of the Labour left.
Oh, no, his mic's not working. Oh, we seem to have an issue. Oh. Yeah, private chat.
Richard's just got a little problem there, so give him a few seconds.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we're going to hear you, Richard.
Lovely. Okay, so you can hear me now. And thanks for that introduction, and apologies for the technical difficulties there. So I really want to start off tonight with a message I think that people don't hear often, and that's the fact that the system is working. The system is working. The system is working for those who designed it. It's working for those it's meant to serve. It's working for the record number of British billionaires whose wealth is soaring by £220 million per day. The system's working for the oil companies They're making thousands of pounds in profit every hour on the back of higher bills for millions of people. And the system's working for the bankers whose bonuses are up 28%. And that's the system the Tories want to see and want to continue. At the same time, of course, there's a cost of living crisis for the many, but it's been boom time for the few, with the rich getting richer because the poor are getting poorer. And so let's be clear, the system has been working for the rich for 40 years of neoliberalism, working when it sucked up wealth into fewer and fewer hands, working when it's privatized public services so that they act as cash cows for private shareholders, working it's left workers getting less and less of the economic wealth that they produce as their wages are held back. But that model, their neoliberal model, is now facing a deep crisis. Its very existence is creating crisis after crisis. Crisis in equality, the crisis in poverty, in health, in wages, in politics, where trust has collapsed because of corruption and all the self-serving we've seen from the Tories. And most frighteningly of all, it's brought us to the edge of climate catastrophe and the potential annihilation of much of life on Earth. As with all the other structural crises that we have faced in the past decades, there will be, and there is, a way out of this. The big question, of course, is who will pay for it, because without a huge political struggle, the crisis will be paid for on the backs of the 99%. And I'd say that the Conservative Party is perhaps the most class-conscious party in the world. It serves its class loyally, that fraction of the 1% that owns the wealth and runs the economy. Every crisis like the one we're in now is for them, the Tories, just an opportunity to hand over more of the wealth and more of the power to the people they serve. COVID, for example, was an opportunity for dodgy contracts. The banking crisis, for example, was an opportunity for selling off public services. And this economic crisis is an opportunity for them to drive down wages and conditions, to finish off our National Health Service, and to ramp up profits further. Make no mistake, the Tories want to use this crisis to turn the UK into a mini USA off the shores of Europe, with poor public services, few regulations, or, as we call them, protections, and soaring inequality. So, to do this, they need to wage a new war on the working class. And it's why they want a new age of austerity. They know that more austerity will create a doom loop, further slowing growth, further reducing people's incomes, further worsening the public finances, and further destroying key public services. But for them, it will get profits up, and to them, that's what matters. So that's what they want to do. But the problem that they face is that through this crisis, millions are seeing how this model spells disaster for the vast majority of ordinary people. And the problem that the Tories face is you and your neighbours, your workmates, your friends, and the potential that you have collectively to resist their onslaught. And the problem that they have is that there is growing organised opposition to all of this, especially from the trade unions and especially from social movements. And there are growing calls to build something better out of these dark times. And that's where momentum comes in. Momentum has a really important role. There are lots of articles, of course, written now about this or that progressive idea, and that's really welcome. But for us as socialists, we understand that we don't just need good ideas, as important as they are. We need to organise. We need to struggle in every single sphere to win those ideas and to build that new, better society. So we need to be organising in our party and mobilising outside, alongside the social movements and the trade unions. And Momentum has an absolutely crucial role to play in that. Momentum's crucial role of being a key link between the many socialists in our party and the social movements, and in doing so, to strengthen the progressive voice overall. So what do we need to be doing? as socialists in the Labour Party. The first thing I'd say is that the crisis is now, so we need to stand with people now. We all want to get the Tories out as quickly as possible and to get that Labour government that can reverse the damage that the Tories have caused to our communities. So it's brilliant that we're so far ahead in the polls and that a majority Labour government will be guaranteed if the general election were tomorrow. But sadly, a general election could be 2 years away. So we need to do everything to side with people now, because wages are falling now. Hunger is increasing now. Public services are being hollowed out now. Our society will be much worse in 2 years if the Tories are allowed to drive through their vision. Therefore, we need to do everything possible now to put up as many barriers as possible to the Tories' agenda. That means standing shoulder to shoulder with those taking action. I've been proud to support the striking workers, and we on the left need to build support across the whole Labour movement for them. And I want to congratulate Momentum for supporting workers and their trade unions fighting back against attacks on pay, terms, jobs, conditions and services. And the Tories and their allies in the right-wing press are going to throw everything they can at the nurses, at the ambulance drivers, at the posties, at the rail workers over the coming months. And our main job is to show them solidarity, to organise, to build the widest possible support inside our party and in every community for their strike action. Momentum's Labour for Labour campaign is a great start, and congratulations to Momentum on that. We need to step up that solidarity in the new year as the wave of strikes increases. And just as we need to stand with workers that they're going to demonise, we can expect a new wave of scapegoating migrants and those on benefits, more social reaction dressed up as a so-called war on woke. So we need to be standing shoulder to shoulder with all those at the sharp end of the Tory offensive. And the second thing we need, in my view, is a vision for the future. And again, Momentum has a crucial role to play in this. We need to seize hold of this moment to begin to win the arguments in our party and in the country on how we could organise things in a much better way. This means stepping up our policy agenda, putting forward clear alternatives to this crisis, straightforward, easy to understand, popular solutions. Solutions that through our campaigning, we can make the norm. So they're not only what our party supports, but they become the new common sense across society. Just as the welfare state became the new common sense in the 1940s because of the struggles of ordinary people. And that is possible because there's a huge public thirst out there for something better. And we need to organise to ensure that our party is advocating these policies. And where we've offered a strong lead as a party, from the windfall tax to energy price freezes, we've forced the Tory government into significant policy changes. We need much more of it. We need a policy agenda that meets the challenge of the scale of the crisis. There's no shortage of popular left policies. There's a whole range of policies, from public ownership of energy and other utilities to a £15 an hour minimum wage, from rent freezes to wealth taxes on the super rich that could help fund devastated public services and tackle the deep inequalities that scar our nation. And many of these policies have strong support in the polls, including amongst people who voted Tory. So Momentum has an absolutely key role to play in organising around those ideas to make them the vision that our party takes into the next election. And in this period where the trade unions and socialists are being kicked left, right and centre in the right-wing press, it's easy to get despondent. It's easy to lose heart. But if you look through the history of the progressive Labour and trade union movement and the history of the Labour Party, socialists have overcome this before and will overcome it again. And we together will create that better society, which is more urgently needed than ever before. There's real anger out there, anger at inequality, anger at poverty in one of the richest countries in the world, anger against injustice. I think Tony Benn summed it up very well when he said that socialism is the flame of anger against injustice and the flame of hope that we can build a better world. Momentum has a crucial role to play in ensuring that those twin flames help to illuminate the Labour Party and illuminate the Labour and trade union movement, so we see a clear path forward to the action that's necessary to give a better life, a better future, a better society and better public services to people in my constituency and to constituencies right across this country. So carry on fighting, carry on organising, carrying on doing the good work that you do as Momentum. And I look forward to many victories for our society to come. It's really important what you do, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. That was very, very inspiring, and thanks so much for all the work that you do and have done in the past. It gives us all hope, I'm sure.
Thanks very much.
And it was great to see you reselected as Labour's candidate for East Eads recently as well, alongside other SCG members like Zara and Bell, and of course Ian Byrne. And we'll all, of course, be supporting Afsana in every selection contest. It's vital that we rally behind her after the disgraceful treatment within the party. Richard, I know you have to shoot off now, but we look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you so much for coming. So Momentum has been doing a lot of work on selections, supporting socialist candidates and MPs with advice in advance, whilst leading the way in exposing the selections purge in the national press. But while these anti-democratic stitch-ups are doing much to block the way nationally, in local government, the left is thankfully making strides. Just this year, we had over 100 socialists join local government as Labour councillors. And Momentum, under the previous NCG, worked with the Democracy Collaborative and the Socialist leader of Preston Council, Matt Brown, to produce a community wealth building toolkit, which we're now rolling out nationwide. So if that's not a reason to up your subs, I don't know what is. Here to talk about the project to lay the foundations for municipal socialism and how we can deliver real gains for working class people is Tammy Hamas, a Momentum member and Labour councillor in Haringey. So Tammy, over to you.
Hi everybody. Just wanted to firstly support what Kate said about supporting Afsana. She is a brilliant MP, the best of our movement, and I think we should be doing everything we can to make sure that she's reselected, because she's a brilliant MP and she is exactly the sort of person fighting anti-imperialism in Parliament that we need. But I guess when I was asked to speak, I've kind of thought about what Momentum had meant to me in a bigger sense. And actually, I first got involved with Momentum in 2016. I was working in a restaurant, living at home with my parents. And actually, it was the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, that was the only organisation that was genuinely standing up for my interests, from being serious about scrapping tuition fees to being ready to take on the housing crisis and the massive rises in rents that we've experienced now and in the last 30 years, really, as well as genuine support for our unions to demand better wages, as well as supporting a much higher minimum wage. Those were the policies that attracted me to Momentum. So I, in the end, put myself forward to become chair of Wandsworth Momentum in 2016. And from then on, I've felt so welcomed and so much solidarity from this community within Momentum and within the Labour Party. So kind of fast forward, I guess, to 2018, where I started working with Haringey Labour in North London. And I just can't emphasise enough the difference that having socialist representatives in local government can make to a local community. As some of you may be aware, in 2016, 2017, in Haringey, a right-wing Labour Council proposed something known as the Haringey Development Vehicle, and this was a plan to sell off huge swathes of public land to a private public partnership, effectively gentrifying large portions of our borough, handing over public land to private developers in order to make profit. It was because of the organising work of Momentum and because of the organising work of a left-wing Labour Party that we stopped that scheme, and that now in my ward, which I represent in St Anne's, we're actually seeing social housing being built for the first time in a long time. We have got a block of 29 social houses that was agreed at a planning committee last week that would be full social housing at council homes, at council rents, and I can't emphasize enough the difference that that can make of having genuine left-wing representation in the Labour Party. But in terms of my selection to be a candidate from the Labour Party, and to represent the left-wing socialist policies that we need in local government, I couldn't have done it without Momentum, and I couldn't have done it without the organising team. I think I want to say that, like, as a trans person, I didn't feel very confident putting myself forward to elected office, but at every step of the way, Momentum have offered me solidarity, they've offered me support, and they've offered me the tools, knowledge, and resources in order to put myself forward and to fight for those policies and for those socialist principles that I really care about. And another example of this I wanted to talk about is our ethical debt policy in Haringey. This is something that was introduced in 2019, again under a left-wing leadership. This has meant that we will no longer, as a council, be deploying bailiffs against our most vulnerable residents, those claiming benefits of any form. I can't tell you, as we face this cost of living emergency, what a difference that makes. I'm a member of ACORN, a union, and what we have seen from many of our members is a massive concern around the fact that local councils set bailiffs onto their residents who the reason they're not paying isn't because they've got loads of money hidden away somewhere. It's because they genuinely can't afford it. And again, having this ethical debt policy, having that approach that says we're not going to take our most vulnerable people to court over debts or council tax bills that they can't pay is a massive thing and shows the value of having left-wing representatives in local government. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about our anti-imperialism. In a week where we've seen Keir Starmer suggest that he may put tagging devices on asylum seekers, we need to stand up for our pro-migrant and anti-imperialist politics. And what we did in Haringey under a left-wing leadership again was that we had refused to work with the Home Office so that when they threatened to deport homeless asylum seekers and migrants, we said, no, you're not going to have any access to our council and we're not going to work with you at all. Again, that is a genuine change which we can see from being involved in the Labour Party that makes a massive difference to the lives and to the communities in somewhere like Tottenham, which is incredibly diverse and has been historically a place where migrants have felt welcome. So I wanted to just highlight those three examples of stopping private development, of building social housing, of having an ethical debt policy, and of not working with the Home Office as real examples of what we can do when we're in power. But right now, I know that for many of my friends and for my comrades, it's hard to see the justification or the reason for being in the Labour Party. But right now, as a councillor, I'm fighting for all those things still. I'm fighting to make sure that we are genuinely standing up for our tenants. I'm working with the London Renters Union, with ACORN, as I mentioned. I'm working with our Stop and Search independent monitoring group. I'm working with Tottenham Cop Watch and so many other organisations who are outside of Parliament, as Richard mentioned, those really important groups, but bringing them in to not just Parliament, but also into local government where those perspectives and voices can make a difference. And I think that is something that we have to fight for. And I know that Momentum has been working really, really hard to do. So just to conclude, I guess, to sum up everything I've said, is that we need socialist representatives more than ever. In fact, it is the crisis that we're seeing in the Labour Party, the policies that we're seeing dropped from Keir Starmer's 10 pledges and from the 2019 manifesto. We need them more than ever, and they can make a difference at a local level. So I'm imploring anyone and everyone, my friends, my comrades, anyone in the Labour Party still, that there is still a fight to be had. And I hope that what I've said today and the difference that I feel that we can make in power in local government will bring more people both back to the Labour Party, but also back to Momentum as a genuine coalition and force for fighting for socialism. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tammy. Thanks so much for that. That was inspiring, and I think the work that you've been doing over the past few years truly gives us hope that there is still a fight for socialism that worth sticking around for. Whether it's in Worthing, or Wandsworth, or Haringey, or Oxford, North Ayrshire, or Preston, there is definitely so much that the left has achieved and can achieve through local government. This is also a key area of work that we're looking to scale up in 2023, which I'm sure you'll be a key part in, and look forward to working with you. So thank you again. Next up is Owen Jones. So Owen will need no introduction to our audience, I can imagine, but he is the Guardian columnist and one of the most prominent voices for socialism in Britain. He's a long-time Labour member for his sins, as am I. And he's going to talk to us about the state of politics today, the hunger for change in the country, and why one component of the socialist strategy has to be about Momentum's work in and out of Labour. Before I hand over to Owen, just to say, you'll receive an email from Momentum laying out how you can up your subs and start a regular donation. So do check your inbox now or after the call to please help keep up Momentum. So over to Owen. Lovely to see you. You're on mute, Owen.
You can hear me. I was silenced. Silenced by the right-wing machine, as per usual. Yeah, it's great to see you, Kate, and great to see everybody else. It is proper nippy out there tonight, but I was being very warmed by the solidarity and socialism on show this evening. Yeah, I'll tell you what, we're taking the scenic route to socialism. It's certainly been a fun ride the last few years. I've certainly aged. I actually look my age now as a consequence of the turmoil since 2015. I think one of the things that Richard Burgon spoke about was apt, talking about the Tories in the context of class war, because the Tories have always been the party of capital, of bosses, of the rich, of the wealthy, of the big business, and they exist to represent those interests. The thing is, in a democracy, not just rich people and big businesses have the vote, so the Tories can't just come out and say that. And what they do is they defend the economic interests of their class, who they fund. Obviously, there's a revolving door between Tory MPs and big business and the city and all the rest of it as well. But they have to win a section of the rest of the population, and they do it in lots of different ways. There's room at the top for you if you play by our rules, with as well appealing to people's basest prejudices on things like those from abroad, on minorities, refugees, migrants. What I do think is interesting is they've not been quite as subtle about it as of late. I mean, Liz Truss's government was just a naked class war government. They were just like, yeah, we're gonna slash taxes on rich people and big business. What are you gonna do about it? Well, I mean, collapse your government for a start. But what they did was just that was helpful. It was just tearing back the curtain. Very clear, £45 billion worth of cuts to taxes for big business, for wealthy individuals, while they were planning in real terms to slash benefits for those who are struggling. You can see that class war in evident at the moment with this scandal on the PPE contracts. So people may have heard about this, during the early stages of the pandemic, because the Tories sort of messed up a bit by not preparing for the pandemic and having PPE in place, even though Matt Hancock was told in January 2020 that 800,000 Britons faced dying without restrictions. during the course of the pandemic by Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer. So they didn't prepare for PPE until it was too late. And then there was a massive rush. So they set up a VIP lane, just coincidentally full of very well-connected individuals and businesses with the Tories, who were showered with huge amounts of cash, including those who lobbied for it. That's what the allegations are about. And some of that material was completely unusable. And it's just a really interesting example of how we're sold this story of free market capitalism being about plucky entrepreneurs and individuals pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. But a lot of modern capitalism is these businesses dependent on state contracts, being showered with state largesse. While at the same time, we're constantly told that the real problem of state dependency is those who are, for example, disabled, or those in low-paid work, because obviously millions of low-paid workers have their wages topped up because they're too low by, for example, tax credits, by people out of work. But the real state dependency is this current scandal, as we can see, the PPE scandals. These are just examples of class war. And obviously, the other element, I think we've not talked about this enough as a movement of class war during this inflationary crisis, is obviously not wages driving up inflation. We've gone through the longest squeeze in wages since the Victorian age. In fact, since the Napoleonic, the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. It's company profits, which are booming, which are driving up inflation. And Unite, the union, did a really, really useful, detailed report going into all of that. So you can see class war on many, many different fronts being waged. Now, what I think is very hopeful is not just the fact that people are fighting back, whether it be the RMT led by our courageous leader, of course, of the Labour movement, Mick Lynch, the nurses, the postal workers, paramedics, and so on. But they've got very broad public sympathy. And that's not something you take for granted, because I'm afraid to say in previous industrial action, if you take the miners' strike, the miners won the battle of public opinion, but only years later, because they were vindicated in everything they said. But at the time, they didn't have public sympathy at all. In fact, during the miners' strike, sympathy for the miners went down to about 14% at one point. But what you can see the polling today, compared to that, or the winter of discontent, is very broad sympathy, particularly amongst the working age population. And that's despite the fact that trade union membership has fallen very steeply from about half of the workforce in 1979 to about a quarter now. Because that's people, even if they're not union members, they're looking at those people fighting back because their wages, everyone's wages are falling in real terms, and thinking fair play, at least someone's standing up for themselves and fighting back. And the government know this. They're playing the old tunes, obviously trying to whip up fury against those despised targets, fat cat nurses, fat cat paramedics, the people who carried this country through its worst crisis since World War II, they did get their claps, which unfortunately I'm afraid to say did not pay the bills. But I think what's interesting is that, naked class war by the Tories, I think, is very evident increasingly to people. And there is broad sympathy for the likes of the railway workers or the postal workers or the nurses, the paramedics who are fighting back. Now, if you look at Keir Starmer, we've been gaslit to death about the deceits, the dishonesty, the rampant dishonesty of his leadership campaign. I noticed some of my colleagues in the British media, my esteemed, respected colleagues, can't bring themselves to talk about his dishonesty. They write these long screeds about Keir Starmer's political strategy, which doesn't, it's just finding any means possible to disguise the rampant dishonesty of Keir Starmer, who ran the most unapologetically dishonest leadership campaign for any major political party in the history of British democracy. The 10 pledges, there was a whole raft of promises he made, from nationalisation, progressive taxes, abolishing tuition fees, which they've not formally scrapped, but I expect they will do fairly shortly. Or his videos during the leadership campaign about when he was at strike picket, saying it's so important that Labour shadow cabinet members are standing up picket lines, and if I'm Labour leader, I'll be out here fighting for you. And then he bans shadow cabinet members and sacks front bench shadow minister on account of standing by those workers. But the thing is, a lot of people might look at all this and think, well, where's the hope? Because we've got this naked class war government. We've got the longest squeeze in living standards in modern history. We do have people fighting back, but in the Labour, the main opposition at this unique potential historical opportunity, despite the terrible crisis, is missing in action and is just offering basically to water down some of the attacks and offer limited social reform. Now, the reason I have hope is a few reasons. Firstly, the left rose from 2015 onwards, not just in Britain, but in places like the United States, for structural reasons. And that's because, in particular, if you look at the working age population, particularly people under 40, neoliberalism promised them freedom, but it gave them insecurity. And insecurity is not freedom. And that's what has made a broad layer of people who suffer the housing crisis, insecure working conditions, falling living standards, public services that have been shredded, social provision which has been shredded, that has made them more sympathetic to the ideas of the left. And that can't be wished away as much as Keir Starmer and his backers would like that to be the case. Now, my own view is that when Labour comes to power, which is, I think, almost inevitable now, given the Tories have self-immolated, it will raise expectations, but they will then be dashed. But that will present a huge opportunity because people will be relieved to see the back of the Tories. But this isn't like New Labour in 1997, when you had a period of social peace because you had economic growth and rising living standards based on a mirage. It was a financial bubble that popped. But their modest social tinkering seemed sufficient in that context. This time, Labour will come to power in the midst of the biggest social crisis since World War II. So the expectations will be great, but they won't meet them. And then what happens when you have this big Labour movement that's already flexing its muscles, and you have this broad sympathy for progressive ideas amongst so much, particularly of the working age population, a movement can mobilise that. And that's when we really, I think, come into play. So in a sense, what we have to do in the next 2 years is consolidate. We have to fight back against the Tory attacks. We have to stand by these striking workers. But we've got to bed in and prepare for what happens when Labour wins. Because that's when, at the moment, the challenge we face, it's almost like, you know, in the pandemic, for example, when you had this rally around the flag effect. People rallied around the government because they thought, oh, it's a national crisis. We need to rally around those with power. And you get an equivalent phenomenon with the opposition at the moment, where a lot of people who maybe are very sympathetic to our ideas, they think to themselves, we've just got to get the Tories out. We've just got to get the Tories out. We've got to rally around the opposition. They're our lifeboat. Don't rock it. But that changes when they come to power and they become the government and they start doing unpopular things. And that's when we come into play. So we have to consolidate right now. And that means we need people in the Labour Party. You know, Ian Byrne, one of the most prominent food poverty campaigners in the country, he was nearly deselected by CLP, but he wasn't. But if a few more people had left his local party, he would have been deselected. Would that have been an advance for socialism? I don't think so. And the thing is, I know a lot of the people around Keir Starmer. I've known some of them my entire adult life almost. And the one thing they want is for all of us to leave. I mean, I don't quite never understand why you do the one thing you want your arch opponents within the Labour Party. Why would you give them that satisfaction? An emotional spasm, which is totally understandable, I accept, but they are goading you to do it for a reason, because they know it will leave people like Zara Sultana and John McDonnell and Richard Burgon more exposed, because the more their members leave the Labour Party, the more exposed people like that are. So it's so important that we have people in the Labour Party, because then when they come to power, we have a two-pronged attack strategy. We have people outside on the streets, people striking, people mobilising, and then we have people in Parliament who can give voice to those movements, and they're only going to come from Labour MPs on the left. And we have people within the Labour Party who can build pressure on other MPs who aren't necessarily on the left, but who can be brought under pressure to support the sorts of policies that we actually need. So that's my view, just finally. That's why I think what we're going to do in the next 2 years, we're going to stand by the striking workers. All of us have to be picket lines, showing solidarity in any way we can. But we've got to basically bed in for the coming battles, which is a Labour government that comes to power in social crisis, raises expectations, disappoints them. And that's when we come into play as the mass movement, putting forward the popular policies, which are the common sense, taxing the rich more to invest in public services, public ownership, genuine workers' rights, liberating young people from being indebted for going to university. All these things will be able to build pressure for them. People will think, whether you accept this or not as a reality, that they're more likely to happen under a Labour government if there's enough pressure, in a way they don't under the Tories. No one ever thinks that anti-trade union laws will ever be repealed under a Conservative government. So it makes it harder to mobilise for those demands it'll be easier to mobilise for those demands. So I know it seems bleak at the moment. I know we're angry with the Labour leadership. I spend about 5 minutes a day kicking a wall, not literally, but I understand the anger. But we can build a mass movement to put pressure on that government that comes to power. And that's when I think the left really comes into play. But solidarity, support, momentum are key in all of this, in organising, if you like, a bridge between the Labour Party and those extra parliamentary movements. So make sure you increase your subs, stand by momentum to the very end, and solidarity.
Cheers, Owen. Thanks for that. That was such a heartening speech. And I mean, I wear a couple of hats, but one of the things I do, hence my background, is I work in Parliament for some of the trade unions. So today I've been out on the picket lines with the tube cleaners as well. So it is absolutely imperative and important that we back all of the striking workers. And just to echo exactly what you've said there as well. And, you know, it might not surprise anyone, but I'm from the Northeast. So have close connections to the miners' strike, and even people I know now who aren't necessarily involved in politics are starting to draw those parallels. And yeah, we need to stick together as a class because, as you say, when Labour gets in this next government, it'll be our responsibility to make sure we hold Keir to account and the leadership to account and the goals that we have. But thank you for that, Owen. Really appreciate it. And see you soon. Solidarity. Right, that's why, bringing us nicely on to 2 years ago, Momentum started up the Leo Panich programme. It was a leadership programme, a training programme to build up the socialist organisers and leaders of the future. One of the many socialists that have graduated from the programme and gone on to do some brilliant things is Reggie Fuller, a Labour councillor in Peckham. He was one of the socialist Labour councillors who supported the successful community mobilisation to stop an immigration raid in Peckham earlier this year, which I'm sure a few of you watching will be aware of, and eloquently made the case for migrant justice in the press afterwards. This is incredibly inspiring. So if you support our efforts to build up socialists and socialist leaders like Reggie, please do up your subs and start that regular donation. So Reggie, it would be lovely if we could hear about the Leo Panich programme and your experiences organising at Labour Grassroots and everything you've been up to. So lovely to see you, and over to you.
Cheers, Kay. Thank you so much. As mentioned, I am a newly elected councillor in Southwark, and I wanted to just say that I never expected to be on the front lines when I joined the Labour Party a number of years ago. I was working for CAB, and I primarily dealt with dealing with the fallout of austerity, so assisting those that were struggling with their welfare benefits and their issues and problems there, and they were mainly working class and ethnic minorities that felt the fallout. Now it was my work there really opened up my eyes, and it really showed me that the system itself was corrupt. The system was failing those at the bottom, and there needed to be a real fundamental change. And Corbyn spoke to me, so I got involved. I campaigned, and I got involved with Momentum because they were churning out amazing ideas, which really resonated with people like me, just a young black man from Camberwell and Peckham that really wanted to see a difference in my community. Now, Momentum were absolutely amazing for me, and I joined the Leo Paddock program because I had heard amazing things. And after going through that program, it really built up my confidence. It really built up my confidence in terms of a campaign strategy. It built up my confidence in terms of community organizing. It built up my confidence in terms of consolidating completely as as to what it meant to be a socialist, what it meant to truly help those at the bottom, what it truly meant to help people in your community. Now, without that program, I would not have been on the front lines to help a resident in my ward who was going to be unfairly taken away by the Home Office under the guise of a racist, hostile environment. I am so pleased, I am so heartened to have helped organize against the taking away of this man, and I can comfortably say that he is at home, he will be there for Christmas, and he is safe. So thank you so much for training me up and help organize the fight back against such a thing. And also thank you so much in the fact that Momentum built up my confidence in terms of going forward to be a councillor in the first place. What I've realized is that there is a lack of black representation at all levels, both inside the Labour Party and in local councils, and what Momentum have done and what they have pushed for further is greater representation for people like me to get up, to be trained, and to really speak for their class and speak for their community. That is something that no other organization is doing right now. Now, what has inspired me to come here is to say that we need to up our subs for Momentum, because they carry out fantastic training for people like me. They carry out fantastic training for people like Tammy, and what that does is that it arms us and it provides us the tools that we need to go into council chambers and to fight for real socialist ideas, policies which will be enacted and which will support our class, which will support minorities like me in the long term. So what does that mean? Well, that means insourcing. Many of our council services are outsourced. They are given to private companies that profit from our labour. And what councils like Southwark are doing is that we are bringing those services back in-house. Our leisure service will be brought in-house from April. We are pushing for a green revolution in the council. We are focusing on retrofitting rather than knocking down council homes, but we're also expanding the amount of council homes that we have in the borough, because we know that there are tens of thousands of people on our waiting list, and that wouldn't have been done unless there was a greater amount of socialist councillors like me in the council. Where we're also pushing for proper ethical procurement in the council to ensure that wealth in the community stays in the community, and really looking at supporting local businesses, most likely black businesses in the area, to really build them up and to really show that instead of monies being thrown out, being passed on to mega organizations that will push contracts to the lowest denominator, they are going to ensure that people in the local community benefit from the real change that occurs there. I've also been involved in the local bus campaign, and that went extremely well. But what that also taught me, and what I learned from the program, is that community organizing works. Focus on the key issues and politicize it. Bus routes were being cut fundamentally because the government wanted to hurt the mayor, but we all knew that cuts to public key services like that were going to affect the working class. They were going to affect minorities. They were going to affect women. They were going to affect children. They were going to affect those that are currently struggling right now in the cost of living crisis. We framed our campaign like that. We went into community centers. We went into every place imaginable, and we got people involved. We got them enthused. We got people who never cared about politics, but they cared about this. We politicized it and we won in the end. And those same people are now enthused. Some of them have joined the Labour Party. Some may even join Momentum, because what they've seen is that real change can be made. Real change can be made, and real change will be made if we organize as a class, as a group, and against the fundamental injustices that we have in our society at this moment. We cannot be in a silo. We need to look out and we need to talk to people. We need to bring them in. We need to hold them close, and that is why I also show complete solidarity with the strikers right now. That is also why we internally in the council, we also need to ensure that we ensure that the terms of workers in the councils are far better than they are right now, and we will also raise that as well. So just to conclude, please join a union and rally your workplace. Get involved in your constituency party, because Labour will be in government in a year or two's time, and we need socialist voices in the Labour Party pushing for real fundamental change. You find time and get embedded in the grassroots community campaigns. I'm talking about your Cop Watch. I'm talking about Right to Food. They do amazing work there. And also in my ward, we have None Head Knocks, which was a grassroots organization created during the pandemic that wrapped its hands around the community and helped people there, and they are continuing to do fantastic work there, but they're also politicizing people and telling people that food poverty is not an accident. It is a political choice, and we need to push against such a thing. But Momentum is the cherry on the cake. What Momentum does is that it consolidates. It consolidates all this knowledge, all this training, the fizz of 2017 and 19. It combines it all, and what it does is that it provides fantastic training for people like me. It encourages and enthuses young people in and around the country, and we need to keep that going. They're going through a tough time, and we need to up our subs to ensure that an amazing grouping like this continues throughout, because we need to agitate for change in the Labour Party, and Momentum is the organisation with the heft, with the power, with the influence to ensure that occurs. So please up your subs. I definitely will, and I hope to see you all on the picket line. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reggie, and thanks so much for the work that you've done. It is truly, truly inspiring, and I hope anyone listening and watching will take your advice, up your subs, get more involved, and yeah, solidarity with all the striking workers. This movement building, it isn't always glamorous, but it is vital. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. That takes us neatly on to the work that we're doing within Labour to build a socialist future. So by primarily supporting young people, even as the left has been under attack within the party as a whole, we've helped win Young Labour for the Left under Starmer twice, once when I was on the Young Labour National Committee, and also winning the positions of the Labour Students' Committee this year. These are absolutely vital bastions from which we can build for the future. So here to talk a little bit more about the work that they've been doing of recent and the importance of socialists working to mobilise young people. It is the lovely chair of Young Labour, Nabeela. So thanks for joining me. Great to have you with me. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's really great to be here with you all today and listen to stories from across our movement. So in addition to being chair of Young Labour, I have the immense privilege of being a councillor for Park and Arbourthorne in Sheffield. This is the ward I grew up in and still live today. And I'm not sure how many people on the call are familiar with Sheffield, but last year's census showed that Park and Arbourthorne is the most deprived ward in the city. For every 4 households, 3 are considered deprived. And what this means is young people who grew up in the area today see boarded up shops, services slashed, and youth clubs that have turned into food banks. And it's communities like ours that have truly paid the price for this Tory austerity and this cost of living crisis. But sadly, this isn't just a Park and Arbourthorne story. This is very much the story of my generation. We know that young people today are the largest generation of private renters in this country. We're more likely to be in precarious work, and those of us who are students are loaded with thousands of pounds of debt before we even enter the full-time job market. Most of us are 1 paycheck away from homelessness. We also know that none of this was inevitable. It was all a political choice. But young people today are refusing to accept these choices. Across our society, we've seen green shoots of organising, often led by young people and students, all of which are emerging in the most unprecedented ways. Throughout the pandemic, young people in cities like Glasgow have led unprecedented unionising drives of hospitality workers, who are predominantly young women. Students have organised dozens of rent strikes across the country and have won rent reduction and rent repayments from universities and accommodation providers. Just last year, young people were the backbone of the largest ever Palestine solidarity mobilisation in British history. And youth climate strikes and Black Lives Matter have dramatically raised our generation's consciousness of climate crisis and all sorts of racist state violence. And just a few months ago, with the support of Momentum and other organisations, Young Labour ran organising schools up and down the country, bringing these young people together. Because we know that the path to real power passes through our workplaces and our communities, as well as the ballot box. And we also know we need to build up grassroots youth and student groups across every corner of the country, providing political education that expands our understanding of the world and our capacity to organise to change it. We need to build mass campaigning youth and student wings, which answer despair with socialist solutions and become vehicles for the hope and struggles of our generation against the multiple crises that beset us. Now, a socialist future can't be won from the top down, and Momentum is an integral part of building empowered, campaigning socialist groups across the country. Now, we all know, and we've heard from all our speakers before, that we have a world to win. And I really hope that you'll all join me in supporting the work of Momentum to bring us one step closer to this.
Thank you so much. It was brilliant, Nabeela. And it's a lovely note to finish on as well. Nabeela is like one of the many young leaders we have on the left at the minute, alongside like Jess Barnard on the NEC and Zara Sultana and many others in Parliament, actually. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and for the work that you do and are continuing to do with Young Labour. That's what our focus is now at Momentum, building for the future. Over the next year, we'll be building up and supporting these local power bases, whether in Young Labour or in areas of local government. We'll be training up the councillors, organisers and leaders of the future, and we'll be supporting members on the ground to get organised, even as we continue to expose the stitch-ups and argue for bold socialist policy nationally, working closely with the SCG. In all of that, we'll look to work with trade unions, and support workers' struggles, as we have done with our Labour for Labour campaign in the past few months. And in the run-up to Christmas, with next week's strikes looking to be some of the biggest nationally we've had in a hell of a long time, I really hope that everyone can rally around and send a massive message of solidarity. We know it's tough right now, but the truth is there is a lot in the future to look forward to, and there is crucial work to be done, especially by us on the left. I mean, they never said socialism would be easy, comrades, did they? So if you haven't, please do up your subs today or start a regular donation. There's a saying up north, shy Ben's getting out. So for those of you that registered for this call in advance, you'll have an email in your inbox with details on how to do it. And if you haven't and you didn't register in advance, a link will be put in the comments now. It takes less than 2 minutes, and even a couple of pounds will make a huge difference, as you've heard, to help build socialism for the future and build our movement going forward. Thank you to all the comrades for coming. Thanks to all the speakers for their fabulous contributions. Solidarity, and keep up the fight. We've got this.